What's up guys, Justin here with the RenderingEssentials.com. So in today's video, we're going to check out one of the most interesting new features of VRAY 6, the Enscape to VRAY compatibility. Let's go ahead and just jump into it. Alright, so you might remember we made a video a little while ago talking about some of the new features contained inside of the newest version of VRAY. And one of the features that I found really interesting was the VRAY and Enscape compatibility. And so I wanted to make a video kind of showing you how that process works, because we now have the ability to set up a scene inside of Enscape and then move it over into VRAY. I'd also love to hear your comments down below on what you think about that particular feature. Alright, so first off, what I want to do is I want to do just a quick setup of a model for rendering inside of Enscape. So we're going to bring in a 3D warehouse model. And so we're going to start by downloading this model from the 3D warehouse. It's the low-cost Villa B by, and I apologize if I say this wrong, Mr. Tan. And what we're going to do is we're just going to click on download. We're going to bring this into our model and we're going to set it up for rendering. Alright, so there's a couple steps I usually follow when I'm doing this. So first off, I like to take all the furniture that's in here. I like to put it on its own tag and turn it off because we're going to use the Enscape furniture in order to set this model up. So I'm just going to call this furniture. We're going to go ahead and put this on the furniture tag and we'll toggle it off. So I'm also going to delete out this default model. We'll leave this for right here. And so what I want to do is I want to go into Enscape. And we're going to go ahead and use the Enscape asset library to populate some models inside of our SketchUp model for rendering. Note these will get brought in as those low poly proxies, which is great because it doesn't really slow down the performance of your SketchUp model. And so remember that when you texture those out or when you render this out, those are going to get brought in as fully textured models, even though they're the proxy models in your SketchUp model for performance. So beyond this, we're also going to want to apply some materials, and then we're going to add some trees in the background in order to finish our setup. All right, so now we're going to go in and we're going to replace some materials. And so the way that we want to do that is we just want to pop open our Enscape material editor and we want to find some of these materials. So for example, I want to replace this wood with an Enscape wood material, right? Because this one is kind of tiled and it's very low resolution. So we can just click on this button right here to do that. And so we want to select a material. So we've sampled this material 15. And what I want to do is I want to right click on it and click on replace with Enscape material. That's going to pop up the Enscape material library and it's going to actually let you pick a material to replace it with. So in this case, maybe we'll go with this wood 01 and just click on the option for replace. And notice how this replaces this in the background of your model right here. So we're going to do that a couple more times. All right, so then if we click on play and we run Enscape, what that's going to do is that's going to show us what our materials look like. And so it was really easy to swap all of those out for higher quality Enscape materials from the SketchUp materials. Note that the grass material that we've applied on here, actually because it has grass in the name, is actually applying a grass texture to it. So notice how these materials look a lot better, right? So this one's a lot shinier and the texturing just looks better. Just overall, it's a better material. So now we've got our materials set up. There's really one more thing that we want to do inside of Enscape, and then we can move over into VRAY. So in order to do that, we're just going to click on the asset library button right here. And we're actually going to add this next part directly inside of Enscape, because it gives us the ability to do this now. So what we want to do is we want to click on the multi-asset placement. That's going to allow us to place things like trees in our model. And it's going to allow us to place multiple different trees at once. Maybe we'll just say tree. But then you can go through and you can pick out some of those trees, right? So for example, let's say that I want this deciduous tree, maybe this tree right here, something like this. We'll just use these three trees. And so there's a few different placement types, right? You could use this to place a line and then place trees on the line. You can also do a circular placement like this, and that'll randomly place those. Or you can also use the brush function or the bucket function, which is going to allow you to click on the surface, and that's going to randomly place trees on a surface based on whatever you've selected. And you can adjust things like the density just by dragging the slider up and down like this. So you can definitely do that. And if you don't like the way this is generating in here, you can also click on the regenerate function. It'll just regenerate over and over again. Now, one thing that we may want to do is we can go ahead and click on confirm placement, but then we can also come back in here and select individual trees that are in the way. Like these, for example, I don't really need because they're going to be behind my camera. So I'm going to go ahead and delete these out so that I only have trees in front of my camera. Now, if I zoom in, move my camera down like this, and click on apply changes, those trees are going up inside of Inkscape like this. So now we've got this image in here that's basically rendering out with our clouds, it's got our sunlight, and it's got our materials all set up. And so now we're at a point where we could export this rendering out of Inkscape if we wanted to do that. We could also make some more environmental changes, or now we can move over into V-Ray, which is what I'm going to do. And so just one thing to note about this is there is this page it's been set up where they talk about the V-Ray Inkscape compatibility and kind of why you would want to do that. And probably the biggest thing that they note on here is if you're working with a design team that's working in Inkscape and you work in V-Ray, everything that they have is now kind of a starting point for your V-Ray project, right? You don't have to go through and set up everything manually or anything like that. So as kind of a like workflow going from Inkscape to V-Ray, that's one piece where you might use that. Another is it just gives you higher resolution options, more output options, and other things that you can change. All right, so the first thing you're going to notice when you open this up in V-Ray is that it's actually rendering out all of those Inkscape materials and trees as well. So you could just use V-Ray, who has some different options for sizes and other things like that in order to render this out. Or you could also replace these with the V-Ray library objects, which are higher quality, at least some of them. But in this case, what we're going to do is we're probably going to swap out a couple of the models in the background. We're going to add V-Ray grass because notice how the grass isn't rendering out, or V-Ray fur as grass. And then we may also change out some of the materials as well because V-Ray has a little bit deeper material library. And so one thing to note is in the new version of V-Ray, they do have a smarter light calculation in interactive mode, meaning that your lighting is going to look better in interactive mode than it did previously. Now, I have absolutely no way of testing this across an older version, but you should be seeing better results in your interactive renders. But what we want to do now is, first off, we want to go in here. I'm going to toggle off my interactive render just so it's not updating in the background. But I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the V-Ray trees, or I'm going to get rid of the Inkscape trees, and we're going to bring in V-Ray trees. And even before that, I guess we can add the V-Ray fur. So to add the V-Ray fur, we're just going to select our ground plane, make it a group, and then we want to open up the V-Ray objects toolbar. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to add fur to our selection. So now if we take a look at our interactive render, notice how our V-Ray fur is acting as grass in here. So, and you can make changes to that from the V-Ray asset editor. So within the asset editor, there's options for fur. If you click the right arrow option right here, I'm not too worried about that. I think it looks pretty good for right now. But the other thing we want to do, and I'm going to stop my interactive render again, but the other thing we want to do is we also want to spread some trees in here. And remember that V-Ray has the Cosmos library that has a number of very high quality models in here for rendering out. So when I open up that Cosmos window, that's going to give me access to the Cosmos browser, and I can access things like vegetation. And they're consistently adding new things in here, but this is also where I can access the V-Ray materials, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But I can take this vegetation and I can scatter that as well. So I've got this mountain alder, for example. I'm going to go ahead and bring one of those into my scene. And then I'm also going to use another model that I've downloaded. Whoops. So we'll go ahead and import that in as well. And so right now there's only two of those in the background, which isn't exactly what we want. What we want to do is we want to take our ground and we want to add a scatter over selection. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click in here, and when I click on the scatter over selection, that's going to add a scatter object. Well, then I can just select these two trees, right, from inside my scene. And within the scatter, I can click on add guests. And what that's going to do is that's going to bring these in here. Now you're going to want to bring your density way down. So I'm going to bring it into like 0.00 2.5 or something like that, so I don't get nearly as many trees in this scene. I'm also going to toggle the collision detection on so that I'm not getting those here in the scene, but you can use this in order to add more trees. So you can do like a 0.0005 in order to get those trees in here as well. So then we can kind of zoom in. And I'm going to adjust the seed a little bit. That's just going to randomize this so that I can get some random trees in here. And then we can go ahead and toggle on our interactive render again to take a look at how this is going to look. And that's going to take a minute to compile that geometry in the background, but you're going to notice the quality of these trees is going to be a little bit higher than the quality of the Enscape trees. And so now we've got our trees in here. We may want to come in here and replace this material with a VRAY material from the Cosmos library. So in order to do that, we're just going to jump over into the Cosmos library real quick. Okay, and so what I want to do is I want to go into the Cosmos library and I want to find a different metal material. So we're just going to go to online. We're going to look under materials and we're going to look under metal right here. And I'm going to look for some kind of like a painted metal or something like that. This dirty iron will probably work pretty good. So we're just going to click on the download button right here in order to bring this in. And at the moment, what I've done is I've found this brown material and I've selected all the objects that have it. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click on this button right here in order to import that asset. And I'm going to right click on it. And I'm going to click on apply to selection. So what we've done is we've replaced that metal material right here with a VRAY metal material. And you can do the same thing with some of these Enscape materials. Notice how there's just a deeper library of materials inside of VRAY. All right, so I went ahead and just added some little hills in the background using sandbox tools and just textured them with the grass. But now I'm just going to make a quick adjustment to the sun by going into the light right here and adjusting the direction that that sun is facing. So remember that you can use a custom sun orientation like this. You can also use that to adjust the angle of the sun in the sky. So you can go ahead and you can make those changes until you get the lighting the way that you want. Then I'm also probably going to add some of VRAY's clouds that they just added in the new version as well. So I'm just going to scroll down to the clouds version. I'm going to play with that a little bit. So I'm going to toggle the variety up, maybe adjust some of the density, but then also kind of offset it a little bit. So notice how you can see where those clouds are going by looking at this scene right here.
And I'm also going to bump my sunlight up to a 2 instead of a 1.
And so once we're done with making all of our adjustments, we can come in here, we can stop our interactive render, and we can do our final render. And so there's a few different ways that we can do that as well. But in this case, I'm just going to jump over into my rendering settings. I'm going to double check things like my quality. You could do a time animation if you wanted to in order to get the clouds moving in the sky. I talked a bit about that in my intro to VRAY 6 video, which I'll link in the notes below. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and toggle my quality to high. I'm going to turn my denoiser on, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start our rendering. All right, so I changed the angle just a little bit because I needed this side by side for the thumbnail. I didn't really change much else other than I added some bushes just so this wouldn't look so empty. But you can see how the one on the left is the Enscape rendering, the one on the right is the VRAY rendering. I like the way both of them look. I would say that the VRAY plants and trees look a little bit more realistic to me, at least in my opinion. There's some stuff with the lighting going on that I like a little bit better in the VRAY side, but I don't think the Enscape side looks bad. It's more a question of you can follow this process and you can get things from Enscape to VRAY if you need to. All right, so that's where I'm gonna end this video. Leave a comment below, let me know what you think about this process. I'd love to hear from you on if you think you would use it, if you would transfer things from Enscape to VRAY. I just love having that conversation with you guys. As always, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this, and I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks, guys.